Your sister was born to live soft, Jenna. You were born to work hard for her. Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. My father said this at Thanksgiving dinner, surrounded by family, while I sat there knowing I'd paid for every dish on that table. The room went dead silent. My cousin's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Even Lily looked uncomfortable for once, but Dad wasn't finished. If you have a problem with that, there's the door. I felt something crack inside my chest. Years of exhaustion, of being the family ATM, while my sister got praised for breathing. I'd worked 2 jobs through college, fixed their broken dishwasher, covered rent when Dad's business was slow. And this was my reward? I stood up slowly, my hands shaking. Fine, I'll leave, and when I do, you can start paying your own bills. Dad laughed, actually laughed. You think you can survive without family? You'll come crawling back. But I didn't laugh back. I walked to my room, packed everything I owned into 2 suitcases, and left that night. What they didn't know was that walking away would destroy them completely. Before I tell you how I watched my family fall apart, let me ask you something. Have you ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to love you most? If you felt that knife in your back, you'll understand every word of this story. And if you know that kind of pain, hit subscribe right now. Not for me, but because stories like this remind us that sometimes walking away is the strongest thing we can do. Growing up with Lily was like living in 2 different worlds under the same roof. Her world was soft pajamas until 2 p.m., online shopping with money she never earned, and dramatic sighs about being too stressed to get a job. My parents called her delicate, fragile, special. My world was alarm clocks at 5 a.m., grease-stained uniforms from the diner, and textbooks I studied between double shifts. When Lily wanted a new iPhone, Dad handed over his credit card. When I needed school supplies, I heard lectures about being responsible with money. The worst part? They made me believe this was normal. Lily's health is fragile, Mom would say whenever I questioned why my 22-year-old sister had never worked a day in her life. Fragile health that somehow allowed her to party every weekend and post Instagram photos from expensive restaurants. Meanwhile, I became the family's unofficial everything. The dishwasher broke, I fixed it. The rent was late, I picked up extra shifts. Car needed repairs. Guess who researched mechanics and negotiated prices? I told myself it was temporary, just until I finished school, just until Dad's business picked up, just until Lily found herself. But temporary became years. Every family dinner was the same script. They'd ask Lily about her day, her feelings, her latest hobby she'd quit within a week. When they turned to me, the questions were different. How much overtime can you work this month? Can you cover the electric bill? Lily needs new clothes for her friend's wedding. I wasn't their daughter, I was their employee. The breaking point started small. I'd gotten promoted to assistant project manager at the architecture firm where I'd been working nights. It was huge for me. Validation that my exhaustion had purpose. I wanted to celebrate. I wanted my parents to be proud. Instead, when I brought it up at dinner, Mom cut me off. That's nice, honey, but don't brag too much. You know your sister gets anxious when she feels compared to people. Compared to people. Not even compared to her sister. Just people. That's when I realized the truth that would change everything. In my family, I wasn't the daughter. I was the workhorse. And workhorses don't get celebrated. They just get loaded with more weight until they break. The family script was so rehearsed, we all knew our lines by heart. I'd get my paycheck on Friday. By Sunday, it was gone. Jenna, can you grab groceries? The car needs gas. Lily's credit card got declined again. Every expense became my responsibility. Every financial emergency became my problem to solve. And when I tried to save money for my own future, that's when the guilt trips started. Family comes first, Jenna. You wouldn't abandon us when we need you most, would you? The manipulation was surgical. They never demanded my money outright. Instead, they'd create crises that only I could fix. Dad's business would have a slow month right when rent was due. Mom's car would mysteriously need expensive repairs the same week I got a bonus. Lily perfected the art of being helpless. She'd tear up over unpaid bills while scrolling through shopping apps. I just feel so guilty that you have to work so hard, she'd say, right before asking me to cover her phone bill. Meanwhile, my own life was on hold. My coworkers went out for drinks after work. I went home to fix dinner. They planned vacations. I planned how to stretch my next paycheck to cover everyone else's wants. The worst part wasn't the money. It was watching them spend it. I'd work a 12-hour shift at the diner, come home exhausted, and find Lily showing off new shoes she'd bought online. Shoes that cost more than I made in tips that night. Dad said it was okay. She'd shrug. You don't mind, right? Mind? I was funding my own humiliation, and they expected me to smile about it. Every time I tried to set boundaries, they'd twist it around. You're being selfish. We raised you better than this. Family sacrifices for family. But the sacrifice only went one way. I gave up my social life, my savings, my peace of mind. What did Lily give up? Nothing. What did my parents give up? Nothing. They called it love. I called it what it really was. Financial abuse with a family discount. And the most insidious part? They made me believe I was lucky to have a family that needed me, that my worth was measured by how much I could provide. I became an ATM with emotions, pressed the right buttons, and money came out. But ATMs don't have breaking points. People do. That Thanksgiving dinner looked perfect from the outside. The table was set with Mom's good china. The turkey was golden brown. Everyone was dressed up and smiling for photos. But I knew the truth behind every detail. I'd paid for the turkey. I'd bought Lily's new dress. I'd even given Dad cash for wine when he claimed he'd forgotten to stop at the store. As we sat down, I felt hollow, empty, like I was watching my life happen to someone else. Dad stood up with his wine glass, bicker grinning. I want to make a toast to the most important woman in our family. For one stupid second, I thought he meant me. After everything I'd done, maybe he finally saw my value. To our beautiful Lily, he said, raising his glass toward my sister, our little queen who brings so much light to this family. The table erupted in cheers. Aunt Carol smiled. Uncle Mike nodded approvingly. Lily blushed and giggled like she'd accomplished something extraordinary by simply existing. I forced myself to clap. My hands felt like they belonged to someone else. When the applause died down, I tried to share my news. Actually, I got promoted this week to assistant project manager. That's nice, honey, Mom interrupted without even looking at me. But let's not make this about work tonight. You know your sister gets anxious when she feels compared to people. Compared to people. Not her sister. People. Lily leaned back in her chair, completely comfortable being the center of attention. You know what Dad told me yesterday? He said it's actually good that you work so much, Jenna. Someone has to fund the family while I figure out what I want to do with my life. She said it like she was discussing the weather. Casual, matter of fact. The room went quiet. I could hear my own heartbeat. Dad nodded slowly like he was delivering wisdom. That's exactly right. Your sister was born to live soft, Jenna. You were born to work hard for her. It's about balance. He looked directly at me. You've got strength. She's got beauty. You make money. She brings joy. If you have a problem with that arrangement, you know where the door is. Something inside me didn't just crack. It shattered completely. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. Everyone stared at me. "Fine," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'll take the door, and when I do, you can figure out how to pay your own bills." Dad's laugh was cold. "You'll come crawling back within a month. You can't survive without family." I walked to my room and started packing. I never crawled back. And watching them fall apart without me became the sweetest revenge I never planned. The first night sleeping in my car, I cried until my eyes burned. I'd parked behind a 24-hour laundromat, hoping no one would bother me. My entire life fit into 2 suitcases in my back seat. I had $200 in my checking account and nowhere to go. The second night was worse. I kept checking my phone, expecting them to call, to apologize, to beg me to come home. Nothing. The third night, I stopped crying. That's when Nina from work found me brushing my teeth in the laundromat sink at 6 a.m. She didn't ask questions. She just said, "My couch is yours for as long as you need it." Her kindness broke something inside me that my family never could. A stranger cared more about my well-being than the people who raised me. Moving onto Nina's couch should have felt like rock bottom. Instead, it felt like freedom. For the first time in years, my paycheck was mine. Every dollar I earned stayed in my account. I could buy coffee without calculating if my family needed that money for something else. But freedom came with guilt. Late at night, I'd wonder if Mom was struggling to pay bills. If Dad's business was suffering without my financial safety net. If Lily was scared about money for the first time in her life. Then I'd remember Dad's words. "You were born to work hard for her, not born to be loved, not born to be valued, born to work hard for someone who treated me like an ATM." The guilt started turning into something else, something sharper, anger. I'd spent years being their personal bank, and when I asked for basic respect, they showed me the door. Well, I'd walked through it. Now let's see how they handled life without their workhorse. I started staying late at work, volunteering for extra projects, pushing myself harder than ever before. But this time, I was working for me. You know what hurt the most? Not what they did to me, but that I still felt guilty for leaving them. If you've ever had to choose your peace over people who never chose you, you already know this pain. Don't just scroll past this story. Hit subscribe and join people who understand that sometimes the hardest thing to do is stop being someone's safety net. You deserve stories that make you feel seen. 6 months after I left, I got promoted to project lead. My supervisor, Janet, called me into her office on a Friday afternoon. "Jenna, I've never seen anyone work as hard as you have these past months. You're getting a raise and your own team." The promotion came with a 30% salary increase. For the first time in my adult life, I had real money, money that nobody else had a claim to. I celebrated by buying groceries without checking my account balance first. It sounds small, but to me it felt like winning the lottery. Meanwhile, I started hearing things through mutual friends about what was happening back home. Lily's boyfriend had broken up with her. Apparently, watching a grown woman live like a teenager got old fast. Without me covering her expenses, her credit cards had hit their limits. She'd applied to exactly 0 jobs. Dad's business was struggling worse than usual. Turns out, when you don't have a daughter contributing her entire paycheck to keep things afloat, cash flow becomes a real problem. Mom had started working part-time at a department store. The same woman who told me that family comes first was now folding clothes for minimum wage because her precious Lily couldn't be bothered to contribute. The beautiful irony? They were learning what I'd known for years. Bills don't care about your feelings. Landlords don't accept excuses. And credit card companies definitely don't care if you were born to live soft. But I wasn't gloating. Not yet. I was too busy building the life I should have had all along. I rented a small apartment. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. I bought furniture that nobody else could claim. I even started dating again, something I'd never had time for when every evening belonged to my family's problems. My coworker Marcus asked me out for coffee. When I told him I'd never been on a real date before, he looked shocked. What do you mean, never? How could I explain that I'd spent my 20s being a parent to my parents instead of living my own life? But Marcus was patient, kind. He actually listened when I talked, instead of waiting for his turn to ask me for money. For the first time, I understood what it felt like to be valued for who I was, not what I could provide. And that's when my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in over a year. Mom was calling. Time for the real show to begin. 18 months after I left, I got promoted again. Senior project manager with my own office and a salary that would have blown my family's minds. I celebrated by buying my first designer purse. Not because I needed it, but because I could. For years, I'd watched Lily carry bags that cost more than my weekly paycheck. Now I understood why she loved them so much. It felt like power. My life was finally my own. I worked late because I wanted to, not because I had to cover someone else's rent. I took weekend trips to nearby cities, something I'd never been able to afford when every spare dollar went to family emergencies. Marcus and I had been dating for 8 months. He'd never once asked me for money or expected me to solve his problems. The contrast was stunning. A relationship where both people contributed? Revolutionary. But success came with an unexpected side effect. The better my life got, the more I heard about how badly theirs was falling apart. Lily had finally applied for jobs, but kept getting rejected. 24 years old with 0 work experience doesn't look good on a resume. She'd started posting dramatic social media updates about how hard life was. Dad's business was bleeding money. Without my contributions, he'd had to take out loans with ridiculous interest rates. The stress was showing. Friends said he'd aged 10 years in 2. Mom's part-time job barely covered groceries. The woman who'd once lectured me about responsibility was now living paycheck to paycheck. Part of me felt guilty. The daughter they'd raised to fix everything wanted to swoop in and save them. But a bigger part of me felt something I'd never experienced before. Peace. I was sleeping through the night. My bank account was growing. My relationship was healthy. My career was thriving. I'd built a life where I mattered, where my value wasn't measured by how much I could sacrifice. For the first time ever, I was putting myself first, and it felt incredible. Until the day their world completely collapsed. That's when desperation made them remember they had another daughter. The call came from my Aunt Carol at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday. "Jenna, honey, I think you should know what happened to your father." Dad's business partner, Steve, had been stealing money for months, falsifying invoices, redirecting payments, moving funds to offshore accounts. By the time Dad discovered it, Steve had disappeared with over $200,000. The business was finished. Worse than finished, it was drowning in debt. Dad had personally guaranteed most of the loans. That meant when the business went under, the creditors could come after everything he owned. The house, the cars, even Mom's jewelry. "They have 30 days before the bank starts foreclosure," Carol whispered into the phone. "Your mother's been crying for weeks. Lily doesn't understand what's happening." Of course Lily didn't understand. She'd never had to worry about money because I'd been her human ATM for years. "What about Lily getting a job?" I asked. Carol sighed. "She's trying, but honey, she's never worked before. Nobody wants to hire someone with no experience, especially not for enough money to save a house." The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. The girl who was born to live soft was about to learn exactly how hard life could be. Dad had always been so proud, so sure that his way was right. "Family comes first," he'd preach while I handed over my paychecks. We take care of our own. But when I needed taking care of, when I begged for basic respect, he'd pointed to the door. Now that door was swinging both ways. Carol kept talking. Your father won't admit it, but they need help. Real help. The kind only you can provide. I almost laughed. After everything they'd put me through, after throwing me away like garbage, they needed the family workhorse again. I'm sorry to hear they're struggling, I told Carol. But I'm sure they'll figure something out. Dad always said I wasn't essential to the family. 3 days later, my phone rang again. This time the number was one I hadn't seen in over a year. Mom. Her voice was shaky, desperate, barely above a whisper. Jenna, we need your help. Your father's business partner stole everything. We're going to lose the house. Please, you're the only one who can fix this. I stared at my phone, remembering the last words Dad had said to me. You'll come crawling back. But he was wrong. They were the ones crawling. Jenna, we need your help. Mom's voice was barely a whisper. I could hear her crying through the phone. Your father's business partner took everything. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage. The bank sent foreclosure papers yesterday. We don't know what to do. I sat in my office chair, looking out at the city skyline from my corner window. 2 years ago, I was sleeping in my car. Now I had a view that Dad could never afford. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Jenna, please. We need $50,000 to catch up on payments and keep the business alive. You're doing so well now. You're the only one who can save us. The only one who can save us. Not the daughter they treasured. Not the girl who was born to live soft. Me. The workhorse they'd thrown away. What about Lily? I'm sure she can help. Silence. Then more tears. Lily's been trying to find work, but it's hard. She doesn't have experience. And even if she found something, it wouldn't be enough. Not in time. I almost smiled. 24 years old, and Lily's resume was completely blank because my parents had spent decades protecting her from the real world. Mom, I'm confused, I said slowly. Didn't Dad say that Lily was born to live soft? That I was born to work hard for her? Jenna, please don't. He told me if I had a problem with that arrangement, I knew where the door was. So I left. Remember? The crying got harder. We made mistakes. We know that now, but we're family. Family helps family. Family helps family. The same line they'd used to guilt me into funding their lifestyle for years. But family had never helped me when I needed basic respect. You're right, Mom. Family should help family. But here's the thing. You taught me that some family members are more important than others. You showed me exactly where I ranked. That's not true. It is true. For years, I gave you everything. My money, my time, my peace of mind. When I asked for simple appreciation, you gave me the door. So I took it. Mom was sobbing now. Please, Jenna. Your father is too proud to call himself. But we're desperate. We'll lose everything. I stared at my reflection in the window. The successful woman looking back at me bore no resemblance to the exhausted girl who'd once lived to serve this family. I'm sure you'll figure something out, I said quietly. Lily was born to live soft, remember? Maybe it's time she learned how to be hard. I hung up and turned off my phone. But 3 days later, I did something they'd never expect. I decided to visit. When I finally stood my ground, they called me heartless. But tell me, where were they when I was breaking? If you've ever had to choose peace over people who never chose you, this channel is your space. Subscribe right now, not for me, but for every quiet soul who learned that walking away isn't cruel. It's survival. I pulled into their driveway 2 weeks later, and the sight took my breath away. The house looked abandoned. Paint peeling from the shutters. Dead flowers and planters I used to maintain. The lawn was brown and patchy. This was what happened when the family workhorse stopped working. Lily opened the door, wearing pajama pants at 3 p.m. Her hair was unwashed, her eyes puffy from crying. The golden child had lost her shine. "Mom, Jenna's here," she called out, then whispered to me, "They're really scared." When I walked into the living room, I saw my parents sitting on opposite ends of the couch. They looked older, smaller somehow. Dad stood up, trying to salvage some dignity. "Jenna, thank you for coming." No hug, no apology, straight to business. Classic Dad. "We need to talk about a loan," he said, handing me a stack of unpaid bills. 50,000 should cover everything. We can pay you back once the business recovers. I looked at the papers. Electric company, mortgage company, supplier invoices, all stamped with red, past due warnings. 50,000, I repeated slowly. That's a lot of money. "You can afford it," Dad said with a hint of his old arrogance. "You're making good money now." I set the bills on the coffee table, the same table where I used to do homework while working 2 jobs to support this family. "You're right. I can't afford it." I reached into my purse and pulled out a folder. "But I'm not giving you a loan." Their faces lit up with hope. "I'm making you a business offer." I handed Dad a legal document. His face went pale as he read the first page. "This is a partnership agreement," I explained. "I'll invest $50,000 into your business. In exchange, I get 60% ownership and complete operational control." Dad's head snapped up. "Are you insane? You want to steal my business?" "I want to buy into a failing business and save it. Those are different things." "Absolutely not. I built this company. It's mine." I stood up and smoothed my skirt. "Then good luck building it back up without money." Mom grabbed my arm. "Jenna, please be reasonable." "I am being reasonable. Dad always told me I was good at working hard." "Well, I've learned how to work smart too." I looked around the deteriorating room. This place needs someone who understands business, someone who won't let partners steal everything. "You're trying to take advantage of us," Dad accused. I laughed, actually laughed. "Take advantage? I'm offering to save you, but this time I'm doing it as an owner, not as your personal ATM. Lily spoke up from the corner. "Maybe we should consider—" "Stay out of this," Dad snapped. "This is business." "Exactly," I said. "And in business, the person with the money makes the rules." I picked up my purse and headed for the door. Think about it. You have 48 hours before the bank takes everything. Behind me, I heard Mom start crying again. But this time, her tears weren't my problem to solve. Dad called me 36 hours later. "We need to talk." I drove back to their house the next morning. This time I brought my lawyer. Dad answered the door looking like he'd aged 5 years in 2 days. The foreclosure clock was ticking, and we both knew it. "You brought a lawyer?" he asked, staring at my attorney like she might bite him. "This is Sarah, my business attorney. If we're going to be partners, we need everything legal and proper." The word partners made him flinch. In his mind, he was the boss who gave orders. I was still the kid who followed them. We sat around their dining room table, the same one where he'd humiliated me that Thanksgiving. Now the roles were completely reversed. Mom clutched a tissue, eyes red from crying. Lily sat in the corner looking confused. Dad had his jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. "This is extortion," he muttered as Sarah spread out the contracts. "This is business," I corrected. "You need money. I have money. But I'm not throwing it into a sinking ship without taking control of the wheel." "You don't know anything about running a logistics company." I smiled. "I know about managing budgets, supervising teams, and making sure partners don't steal everything. Apparently, those were skills you were missing. That hit him hard. His business partner's betrayal had shattered his confidence. Sarah explained the terms clearly. I would own 60% of the company. All major decisions required my approval. Dad would remain as operations manager, but report to me. You're stealing my life's work, Dad said bitterly. Your life's work was about to be repossessed by the bank, I replied. I'm saving it. The silence stretched on. Outside, I could hear a car door slam. Normal life continuing while our family drama played out. Finally, Mom spoke up. Sign it, Richard. We don't have a choice. Dad's hand shook as he picked up the pen. 25 years of running his own company was about to end. His daughter, the one he'd treated like hired help, was about to become his boss. The signature took forever. Each letter looked like it physically hurt him to write. When he finished, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Not revenge, not anger, power. Congratulations, I said, shaking his hand across the table. We're officially business partners. He couldn't even look at me. The next morning, I walked into his office wearing a business suit and carrying my laptop. Time to show them what a workhorse could really do when she was working for herself. My first day as majority owner, I fired 3 people. All of them were Lily's friends who'd been hired as favors. They showed up late, left early, and spent most of their time gossiping. Dad had kept them because he couldn't say no to his precious daughter. I could. We're restructuring for efficiency, I announced at the morning meeting. Anyone not pulling their weight will be replaced with actual professionals. Dad sat in the corner, watching his daughter dismantle years of his poor decisions. His face was stone, but I caught him nodding when I fired Jake, Lily's ex-boyfriend who'd been stealing office supplies. The biggest change? Lily was getting her first real job. Receptionist position, I told her, sliding a job description across my new desk. 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. Same expectations as any other employee. Her mouth dropped open. But I don't know how to... Then you'll learn, like everyone else. The first week was pure comedy. Lily cried when I told her she couldn't wear yoga pants to work. She had a breakdown when someone asked her to transfer a call. She left early on Wednesday because answering phones made her anxious. Thursday morning, I called her into my office. This isn't working, she said before I could speak. This job is too hard. Good, I replied. Hard jobs build character. I want to quit. Then you'll quit and move out of Mom and Dad's house, because this company is now paying their mortgage, and employees who quit don't get family discounts. She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. You're being mean. I'm being an employer. You want the job, you do the work. You want to quit, you figure out how to survive without family money. For the first time in her life, Lily had a real choice with real consequences. She chose to stay. By the 3rd week, something amazing happened. She stopped crying. She learned the phone system. She even started showing up on time. Meanwhile, the business was transforming. I implemented new accounting systems, renegotiated supplier contracts, and hired competent managers. Within 3 months, we'd turned a profit. Dad watched it all happen from his desk, his former kingdom now running better without his complete control. One evening, as I locked up the office, Lily approached me quietly. I never realized how hard you worked for us, she said. I'm sorry. It wasn't much, but it was the first real apology I'd ever gotten. Progress. 1 year after I took control, the business had doubled its revenue. We'd gone from nearly bankrupt to profitable in 12 months. I'd streamlined operations, eliminated waste, and turned Dad's failing logistics company into a machine that actually worked. The local business journal wanted to interview me about the remarkable turnaround. When the reporter asked about my management style, I smiled and said, I treat the business like it matters. Dad read that interview 3 times. I found the article on his desk with coffee stains and pencil marks in the margins. He'd never admitted out loud. But he was studying how his own daughter had saved everything he'd built. The most shocking change was in Lily. 6 months of real work had transformed her completely. She'd learned the computer systems, managed client calls, and even started suggesting improvements to our filing system. One afternoon, she knocked on my office door. I've been thinking about going back to school, she said quietly. Business administration, maybe. I want to understand how all this works. I looked up from my laptop. That's a good idea. Would you help me apply? I don't really know how. The girl who'd once demanded everything was now asking for help. Politely, like a normal person. Of course, I said, but you'll pay for it yourself, with money you earned. She nodded quickly. I know, I want to. 3 months later, Dad finally said what we both knew was true. We were reviewing quarterly reports when he set down his pen and looked at me across the conference table. I can't pretend anymore, he said slowly. You saved this company. Hell, you saved this family. The admission hung in the air between us. I spent 30 years building this business, and you fixed it in 1. You're better at this than I ever was. It wasn't the apology I'd wanted 2 years earlier, but it was acknowledgement, recognition that I'd been right to demand respect. The company is successful because everyone here works hard, I replied, including you. He shook his head. No, Jenna. The company is successful because you know how to lead. I was just a guy who got lucky until my luck ran out. That evening, Mom called me for the first time since our partnership began. Your father told me what he said today. We owe you everything, and we know it. I sat in my apartment, looking out at the city lights, thinking about how far we'd all come. We're family, Mom. Family helps family. But this time, the help was flowing both ways. 2 years after the contract signing, I hosted Thanksgiving at my place. My apartment was everything their house used to pretend to be. Modern furniture that I'd chosen myself. Art on the walls that reflected my taste, not theirs. A dining table where every seat was equal. When my parents arrived, they moved carefully, like visitors in a museum. Dad wore his best shirt. Mom brought flowers. They were respectful in a way they'd never been when I lived under their roof. Lily came last, carrying a homemade pumpkin pie. I made it myself, she said proudly. From scratch. The girl who'd once lived on takeout and convenience foods had learned to cook. Working for a living had taught her skills our parents never bothered to. Dinner was quiet at first, polite conversation about work, weather, and safe topics. Nobody mentioned the old days. Nobody brought up the fight that had broken us apart. But I could feel the difference in every interaction. When Dad wanted salt, he asked politely and said thank you. When Mom needed help in the kitchen, she requested it instead of demanding. They treated me like an adult whose time and effort mattered. The change was so complete it almost felt like acting. After dessert, Dad cleared his throat and stood up with his wine glass. I want to make a toast, he said slowly. My stomach tightened. The last time he'd made a toast, it had ended with me sleeping in my car. To Jenna, he said, looking directly at me. You were right to leave that night. We should have treated you better. We should have seen your value long before we lost you. He paused, struggling with words that had taken him years to find. You saved our business, our house, and probably our family. But more than that, you showed us what real strength looks like. Mom wiped her eyes. Even Lily nodded in agreement. We're proud of you, Dad finished, and I'm sorry it took us so long to say it. Everyone raised their glasses. For the first time in my life, I was the center of a family toast for the right reasons. Later, as we cleared dishes, Lily pulled me aside. "So are we good now?" she asked quietly. "Are we really okay?" I looked at my sister, transformed from spoiled princess into a working adult who'd earned her own money and paid her own bills. "We're fine," I said honestly. "But I'll never go back to being your safety net. You understand that, right?" She nodded quickly. "I wouldn't want you to." That was the moment I knew we'd all finally grown up. People ask me if I got my revenge. The truth is, I never had to plot anything. I never schemed or planned their downfall. All I did was stop being their personal ATM. My revenge was success. My revenge was building a life where I mattered. When you spend years funding your own humiliation, walking away isn't cruel, it's survival. My family learned the hard way what happens when you treat someone as expendable. They lost their control, their entitlement, their comfortable illusion that they could take without giving. I gained something they could never steal from me again: peace. The business is thriving now. Lily has her own apartment and pays her own bills. Dad respects my decisions because he has to. Mom treats me like an adult because she learned what happens when she doesn't. But the most important change? I sleep through the night. No more 3 a.m. anxiety about covering someone else's rent. No more guilt about spending my own money on myself. No more wondering if my worth is measured by how much I can sacrifice. I learned that family love shouldn't cost you everything you have. Some people think I was too harsh. They say family forgives, family endures, family puts blood before boundaries. To those people, I say this: family should also respect, appreciate, and value each other. When they don't, you have two choices: stay and accept less than you deserve, or walk away and demand better. I chose to walk away, and it saved my life. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stop fighting for people who never fought for you. Sometimes revenge isn't about payback, it's about peace. And sometimes walking away isn't giving up, it's growing up. Simple as that. Final CTA. Sometimes silence is the loudest revenge. If this story touched you, subscribe right now. Because somewhere out there, another person is watching in silence, funding their own disrespect, needing a reminder that they're worth more than they're being offered, and your one click might help them find the courage to choose peace over people who never chose them.